It's been a while since I've been on. To cut a long story short, I pretty much made a career change, and it's kind of been, I don't want to say chaotic, but a lot's pretty much went down. And the dust is finally starting to settle for me. I can't say I'm going to come back and post videos like I did in the past, but I'm going to at least try because I still get a fair amount of emails and um, personal messages, and I try to respond when I can. Um, but because with my new career, I spend so much time, um, pretty much uh, in front of a computer. I just, when I get home, I want nothing to do with a computer, right? So it's very hard to check non-work emails and just non-work related stuff. But anyways, like I said, I'm gonna try. A couple of folks I've been in contact with, unfortunately, some other folks I haven't been. But you know how it is. But anyways, um, my thoughts were everywhere. Um, After the Trayvon Martin verdict, there was just a lot of craziness in the sense that there was a lot of conversations and discussions that were just like off topic, and I don't care if they're black, white, or whatever. People trying to talk about their own agenda, and move away from the actual case, right? The actual story in terms of what went down, and uh, you just shake your head. I did. And to be real with y'all, I was already extremely pessimistic about this whole idea of a black collective and this sort of push to change the conditions for the vast majority of black folks in America. And now I'm even more pessimistic. So I'm like almost like 95% pessimistic and 5% optimistic about any sort of large scale improvement to the black collective here in America. I just don't see it happening that way. And like I said before, this idea of blacks doing better and doing this, they're going to have to be born in an environment where that's already the case. Simple as that. So people talk about, an increase in the educated population of black America, increasing the black middle class or doing this and doing that. And that's only going to happen if, quite frankly, we have little boys and girls who are born in those environments. Simple. People tend to stay, in terms of their adult life within the realm that they were born into. So if you were born middle class, that's probably where you're going to stay. If you were born to a home where education had a certain value, then more than likely that's what you're going to show. And it's easier to fall below, right, where your parents were when they had you versus taking it to the next level. It's very difficult to do. I don't know too many folks who were born middle class and all of a sudden they made it to the upper class. It's very hard to do, right? Um, so that's just my take. And I'll get into how even that's being fucked up, but that's in a later video, and I'll talk about the whole idea of black folks talking about competing, but yet the black men and black women who should be having kids are not having kids, but that's for a future video. Anyways, um, when I look at the black reaction post Trayvon Martin, um, everything centered around inequality and racism. You can boil it down to inequality, right? Racism is a tool of inequality, in my eyes at least, right? And oftentimes racism is used to um, support inequalities and promote inequalities or whatever. Um, And my issue with black America is that I don't think we properly understand what inequality means. Now, number one, for most of the black folks who are on CNN and most of the black folks who are on, the cable news networks, or who are writing the blogs, doing this, a lot of the times these people know better, but they have to always have the same conversations because that's what's entertaining, to tell you the truth. So a lot of the times, I don't even take what I see on TV seriously. I really don't take what I see on CNN and Fox News and CNBC. I don't take it seriously. Because at the end of the day, they're having the same argument over and over again because that's what sells. Let's blame this person and shake the finger. It just works. So as much as Bill O'Reilly will talk about, oh, stop complaining, at the end of the day, it's still good TV, right? So I think a lot of black folks have to be aware of that. These people aren't pushing the conversation. It's the same conversation over and over and over and over again. Nothing new has happened. If you really think about it, there isn't any. I didn't hear any brand new conversation coming out of the whole Trayvon Martin aftermath. It's just been the same conversations we've had 5 years ago, 10 years ago. Because once again, that's just what's entertaining. That's what people want to see. The whole idea of the black community versus the white community and racism and this and that and the third. Like, that's what they want to see. Right, so all these black folks, these intellectuals or whatever, these are business moves. They're being paid to come on these shows. They're being paid to do this. They're being paid to do that. But to talk about something that doesn't fit in terms of what, the mainstream media wants to have in terms of conversations over race and equality, they're not going to be on TV, so therefore they're not going to have a job. Simple, right? So you have that camp. And like I said, with that camp, I do believe that they know better, but it's just a matter of good business, right? But anyways, what I want to talk about are your black folks who truly do believe that somehow pointing the finger of morality when it comes to inequality, like that somehow worked for African Americans. Because it's never worked. But I think people believe that whatever we have, we got from moral shaming. And the whole idea of highlighting inequality. Number one, slavery. Now, I think most folks get it, right? You don't even have to be that educated as far as black history goes to really understand what ended slavery. It wasn't morality. It wasn't this whole idea of equality. It was economics. We all get that. The dumb part about it is the same religion that was given to African Americans, right, was still there during slavery. So it wasn't like slave masters and white people were devil worshipping and they found God and then they realized that slavery was wrong. No, not at all. The same religion that we use today, that's where we got it from, right? So it's like, okay, how does that work? How does your slave master go to church? You know what I mean? Like, I don't get it, right? So I think most folks understand that, yeah, slavery really didn't end for any other reason apart from economics. Simple. The white media can add on the whole idea of, it was your whites who were progressive and it was your whites who were against it. They kind of made it happen. Get out of here. It was economics. Simple. Right? But when you get force-fed this whole idea that it wasn't about economics, it makes you docile. You can't hate all of us because, hey, we helped you. Right? But anyways, let me keep it pushing before I go off on a wild tangent. All right, so now let's go with civil rights. Now, we can go to other places, but I'll go to the civil rights movement of the 50s and the 60s or whatever. Now, most black folks believe that it was the whole idea of the riot, not rioting, but the protests and the sit-ins and the doing this and the doing that, and Martin Luther King and Malcolm X, and if it wasn't for them, we would still be living in a world, pre-1950. If you really think about it, right, and the sad part about it is, for me, The first time I had this conversation was about 9 years ago with an Indian dude. He was like a TA for a class I was taking. And he talked to me about how it's unfortunate, but a lot of African Americans aren't really critical over the civil rights movement. Why the push now? Once again, going back to the whole idea of morality. All of a sudden, white folks realize that Jim Crow and, legalized laws that promote racism and oppression is wrong. Were they devil worshipping before and they found God and they realized that we can't have laws that kind of encourage and promote this type of treatment? Now we get it. Now we understand that we can't have a sign that says for white folks only, over a water fountain. No. And he talked about how you have this new idea of broadcast television where people can now watch television programming who live in different countries. So now there's this idea that everybody throughout the world can see what's going on in the South. Right? So think about that. So in a sense, America's dirty laundry was being aired. So if you're trying to spread your ideals and spread this whole idea of the Americanized way and, spread your culture, how is that going to work in terms of why our way is better or why our way should be part of your way when you have a legalized system that is allowing certain folks to be treated poorly and to be killed? It was bad for business. That's it. It was bad for business. It wasn't that we struck some morality chord in America. No, it was bad for business. So you had this whole idea of, okay, guys, we can't have legalized racism and oppression. We can't. So we have to, do away with Jim Crow and this, that, and the third. But what we can do is just make it more covert, right? We'll make it covert. So quite frankly, from a legal standpoint, they can't say this, they can't say that. Oh, we're still going to, operate as normal. Just do it under the table. Right? It's like when your favorite barber leaves the shop and he's like, I'm going to work for myself. I'm going to work out of my apartment or I'm going to come to you. Right? Hey, you're not officially working at a barber shop, but, you're still going to get paid. Right? Just unofficially, under the table. The tax people won't know, about the $15 I gave you or whatever for a haircut. Right? That's pretty much all that happened. And then they said, oh, okay, we'll let a few black folks come through. We'll let a few. But the beauty about it is their success will always be intertwined with our success. Willie Pete touched on this a while ago when he talked about it doesn't matter how rich a black man gets because it's always tied to the white power structure. So you talk about the NBA, so if LeBron James made X amount of dollars off playing for the Miami Heat and having his endorsement with Nike and who else, who's paying him, quite frankly, the owners of those companies are still making more money. Simple. Or we can talk about Tiger Woods. So just imagine, Tiger Woods is paid. So just imagine how paid the other people are as far as his success being attached to their bank accounts. So it's like one of those, okay, we'll let a few more in, but it doesn't really matter because, if they do well, we profit off of it. And the dumb part about it is they're still going to spend their money with us anyways, so we're going to get it back. Don't trip. We're going to get it back. So for me, and people can say whatever, but the civil rights movement was a joke. Because once again, it didn't address the whole idea of the black collective as we see today. It didn't. It worked for a few folks who got through the door, and that's about it. But once again, like I said, somebody come on and name me a glory period for African Americans, especially for black men. Please give me a glory period, and I won't say shit. But it was never there. But you have folks who truly do believe that it was Martin Luther King and the whole idea of shaming white America and inequality and striking that chord. That's what brought about a change. No, it was bad for business, right? To have a system set up that allows legalized oppression and racism and violence, it was bad for business. So I guess you could also tie it back to economics. It was bad for the money. It was bad for the wallet. So in a nutshell, African Americans, in my opinion, have never had any success with any sort of, shaming type tactic. So when I look at the conversations that were being had post Trayvon Martin, I'm like, yo, we're really fucked. Because we don't even understand our own history. We don't even understand why we're here. And it's sad to say, but like I said, in my eyes, what few stuff we have now is little more than a byproduct of, all right, this is bad for business, so we have to allow them to have at least have this. Come on now, we can't let them have anything. Or, we can't let them go without nothing. We have to give them something, because to do otherwise is bad for business. It's bad for what we want to do. If we want to spread our ideals and way of life, come on now, we have to give off the illusion. And we bought that illusion in terms of, yes, this is what we did. This is what we accomplished when we protest, when we complain, and when we do this. This is what we get. And I'm like, no, it hasn't got you shit. So, to wrap it up, when we think about inequality, I don't really think we understand it. We really don't. We say it, but we don't understand the importance of inequality. And inequality pretty much means that one side has more than the other. You have 9 candy bars, I only have 1. One side has more. Now, to get into human nature, to me, it is human nature's, you can call it a flaw, you can call it whatever you want to call it, but it's human nature for folks who have an advantage to not give it up, even if you shame them, even if they believe in God. You're still not going to give up whatever advantage you have, especially when you talk about your children and the whole idea of, well, the blood's not on my hands. Well, the blood's not on my hands, so, it is what it is. What can I say? At the very best, you may get white people to cry. They may say, hey, we're going to give you guys 10 more turkeys for Thanksgiving. Let's give them 4 more PlayStation 4s or whatever they call it for Christmas. Let's hire on 2 or 3 more black guys. Right, but with that, it's almost irrelevant because their success is still tied to mine. You may have that, but this idea that if I have 9 candy bars and you have 1, I'm gonna give up 4, so we both have 5 each. It's not gonna happen because it's not in human nature. And this isn't a pass for white America. I'm just saying that this is how we're fucking built. Hence inequality. I don't give a fuck where you go on this planet, or I don't care what time period you go to. There's always been inequality because it's a fucking human flaw. Excuse me. And the side that has more doesn't want to give it up, even if there's fucking religion and morality in that particular civilization. They're just not gonna fucking give it up. So I guess you can call it a flaw or whatever. Because you're probably not, because if we're a well-oiled machine, it can't work as efficiently if only parts of the machine have enough to run off of and the other parts don't, right? I guess, we'll never be as efficient because of inequality, but that's just how we're set up. It's a human fucking flaw. the more I think about it. You can make them cry. You can make them feel a certain way. You can have people like Tim Wise. I've seen Tim Wise speak in person twice now. You know, you can have people like him who will tell white America this is the case. But still, nothing's going to change. Why? Because, hey, when they think about their kids and their future, hey, I want them to have an advantage. And quite frankly, the blood's not on my hands. I didn't do it. Yes, I benefit from it, but I didn't do it. You know, it's like, let's say your grandfather was a fucking bank robber, but he never got caught, right? And the millions of dollars he stole, right, got passed on to you, you know, through inheritance or whatever, and you know, you were made aware of how you got it. So let's say you're 30 years old, you know, and you have $5 million in your account that you got from your grandfather. And you come to realize that, hey, your grandfather got this money because he was a thief. But no one knows. No one's going to come after him. They really can't touch your money in your account. What are you going to do? Are you going to give up the money? Or are you going to say, my grandfather got this money illegally, so I have to give it up? No. Because once again, you're not going to put yourself at a disadvantage. If you have kids, you're like, man, I'm not going to fucking do all that. My kid's life is set. I'm not going to fucking blow that. And you're also going to say, well, you know, I didn't do it. I benefited from it, but, you know, the blood's not on my hands. And that's what you have. That's inequality. So what I'm trying to say is, you don't fight inequality by trying to get the side who has more to give up what they have, because it's a losing battle. It's not going to happen. We're not built that way. And I think people have this illusion that, well, we're getting somewhere because they gave me one candy bar, so now they have 8 and I have 2. So I can keep going. And that's an illusion. Like, that's the sacrifice. That's that I'll give you a little bit so I can feel better about myself and so that you can shut the fuck up. And to me, it's simple at this point. That's why for me, it's just like, nothing's going to change. Think about it. The whole passion, the crying, the Facebook messages, all this and black men and black males, it's safe to say that it's dead now. Is anybody talking about it? No. People moved on till the next black boy gets killed, or we have the next Oscar Grant. And the cycle's going to continue. Because we got people who are uninformed, and we got people who, quite frankly, would rather make money than to really talk about, you know, the realities and what we should be thinking about as far as moving forward. So, like I said before, I was highly pessimistic before about any sort of movement that would include the vast majority of African Americans, and now I'm pretty much sure that it's fucking done. So my next couple of videos, I'll talk about the reality as I see it and the issues even with that reality. Because I think we're in danger of just completely being done forever as far as any hope of being competitive on a global scale, or at least like competitive in the sense that we're recognized as a legitimate contender or as some sort of threat. Because right now, we're not a threat to anybody. Ain't nobody fucking worried about African Americans and what they can and can't do. Sorry, it is what it is. Don't tell me about spending power. We've been saying that shit for how many years? We ain't never gonna fucking mobilize whatever fucking spending power we have. So I'm gonna end it here. There's some other shit I want to touch on, but I'm in this one here. Got to get the rest off, but y'all take it easy. God bless.